What it do, anime crew? Hey man, listen, today I'm going to be ranting about Dandadan because I just caught up. There are currently 12 episodes out, and I believe season 2 will be another 12 episodes and has been confirmed for summer of 2025. Let's just get right into it. Dandadan is not quite my absolute favorite anime of the 2020s, or anime in recent history, however you want to say it. But it's definitely in the conversation, and there's one quality that it has above every other show I've seen in the last 5 years. And that is that it drips the aura of a show that is trying to be a modern classic. It's unforgettable in a way that I can't think of many other shows that are. Just with how bold and unorthodox its style is, with how ambitious the visuals are, with how ambitious the story is, with just all the stuff going on thematically, narratively, in terms of the characterization. It is just an extremely ambitious story. And that's the thing that I respect about it above all else. Like, there's so much going on that I would forgive you for thinking that it's just like meaningless, dumb, inane bullshit. And, you know, a lot of times it will lean into the more inane elements and be a little bit goofy and sort of juxtapose the serious character development happening with a materially, literally absurd plot point. Like, you know, of course, the main one would be trying to get Okarun's balls back. Obviously, it's very important to him. You know, there are coming-of-age metaphors at play there and stuff like that, but it's just really silly. Some of the stuff that, of course, Turbo Granny says, it's very goofy, and this translates into the fight scenes a lot. I would say that my favorite example of it is during the big fight in the water school, where the school gets turned into water. When Okarun and Momo are having a disagreement, they're getting chased by the mantis shrimp guy, who's just, like, slinging uppercuts from underwater and just having these like giant geyser like bursts come up that would like clearly freaking vaporize them, and they're in like very immediate danger and the scene's very tense, and then all of a sudden they stop to have like a character moment where they have this really impassioned argument that is coming to the climax of this fight scene that's been building up for like a big reveal, and it ends up being more of an emotional reveal as they sort of, you know, talk through the admittedly kind of lamely set up stupid ass misunderstanding they had where Ira was like on top of, or where Okarun was on top of Ira rather. But as they're arguing and as this is happening, it's like a very goofy subversion of the tension that they just built up, because then they just stop in the water after trying to swim away from this guy so fast. They stop in the water for like 15 seconds just to have this argument, just to have this character moment. And as the conversation ebbs and flows, the water is flowing in waves in the foreground of the screen. And like as Momo like musters up her extremely, you know, passionate retort and, you know, loading up her accusations and stuff, the wave will push her up so that she's taking up more of the frame and like looking down at Okarun. And then like as Okarun, you know, starts to take over the conversation and gets a little bit indignant and starts like spouting out his points, he gets like a lot bigger, and then like it's downslope showing Momo, and it's like a really cool, really dynamic scene that I can't believe I've never seen that shot before. It's such a good idea. It's so nice. Everything about the production of the show is just nice. You can tell that there's a lot of unadulterated creativity, not only in the directing, but also the animation. I mean, this thing's chock full of references, which is always a good sign. It is, you know, a lot of different cuts have very different styles. Of course, the shining example being a lot of the stuff that was going on in the Acrobatic Silky episode, I believe it was episode 7, where they had like those pseudo live action segments, and then they had that like extremely tragically, poetically beautiful scene of her dancing on top of the roof before, you know, doing what everybody tells me to do when I insta-lock Black Widow and Marvel Rivals. I would also point to the dialogueless montage section from that same episode as being a very creative way to communicate the story that isn't directly in line with necessarily how the rest of the story is presented and directed, but is the more powerful way to do it. And Oh my gosh, that montage included like one of the sauciest shots. Like, I don't understand how Science Saru got the freaking mega budget for this thing. I don't know if it's just that much of a passion project or if they really have some money behind this, but it is consistent. There was that part in that montage where it was like a rotating camera with the candles for her birthday in the foreground, and it like goes over to her face. Beautiful. Extremely beautiful. A lot of moving parts there. Very ambitious in terms of the animation throughout that entire episode. And then it's like, usually, if you see an episode that's clearly meant to be a masterpiece, like that one is, and especially in the way it's super underrated in the way that it frames Ira's character as an introduction. The entire thing is a plot device to frame the emotional crux of Ira's character, and it's so fucking good for that. That's like a really underrated episode in its writing in the grander scheme of the show, I think. But then you would think, like, holy shit, what an animation and cinematic spectacle that episode was. We're probably going to chill out for the next episode a little bit. Nope. Back on full throttle. Amazing shots from beginning to end. Ambitious visual concepts. The story's still moving just as fast. It's not giving you any time to breathe. Acro Silky is back. There's more badass moments. There's more creative, fun, strategy-oriented fight scenes. More goofiness. More really good little, like, silly, low visual quality gags. Stuff like that. We're just right back on it. And even, like, in the dialogue, there's the famous noodle off scene where they both, Momo and Ira, are having an argument through slurping ramen noodles, but then like they keep getting more pissed off and slurping more aggressively, but that like further obscures what they're even saying, so there has to be like subtitles on the screen, and then Momo gets like pissed off and like knocks all of Ira's subtitles away because she's pissed off and trying to get her words out, even though she's sucking noodles so hard that you can't even understand her. It's very charismatic. It's very cheeky. Of course, there is a lot of personality to the dynamics in the show. All of the main dynamics are kind of adversarial in a chummy way. Momo with Seiko, Seiko with Okarun, Momo with Okarun. It's all like a teasing, but ultimately everybody's looking out for each other type of dynamic, which I respect. I feel like some people go a little bit overboard with talking about how fucking legendary the dynamics are in this show. Maybe that's just a really specific experience of mine, but I think it's neat. I think it's definitely solid. It's a strong point of the show for sure. I just probably appreciate the visual and directorial effort of these more slice of life oriented scenes even more than I appreciate the character dynamics themselves, because the team over at Science Saru, and I should know this director's name, but I don't. I'm going to look that up right after I finish recording this. But what they do is they make sure every scene is framed in a way that gives it personality. They keep it engaging, they keep it dynamic, they keep it vibrant, and there's just a tremendous amount of effort poured into the consistency of this show. I think about a show that looks fucking beautiful, like Attack on Titan, but then when you look at any of the non-fight scenes, you have a lot of characters just standing around very statically. You got some action lines here, and like it's not exactly going to knock your socks off all the time. I also think about Demon Slayer, in terms of like having these super concentrated bursts of beautiful animation, but then not really having the production value to maintain a solid visual quality throughout the less climactic scenes, which can be just as important because, especially in this generation, it's really easy to lose a viewer's attention. You will never feel that way in Dandadan. There is not a single episode in Dandadan that feels long. I mean, the last 3 episodes are kind of mid, honestly. They're kind of like a little bit mid, but mid's a bit harsh. I really like some of the characters they introduced at the end. Just personally, I'm a really big fan of the boxer, alien, Japanese salaryman guy. He's just sort of really in line with my aesthetic sensibilities. But also, you gotta mention the frickin' new guy. I don't remember his name. Gigi. I think Gigi's sick. I feel like a lot of people are going to find him annoying, but I love him because he's sort of like a rival love interest for Okarun in a way that's obviously going to push his development, push him to more directly pursue Momo, and move the plot along in a way that wouldn't feel unnatural for the characters. But what I respect about his character is that he almost seems likable in real life. Like, it's almost the type of guy who would be likable in real life, but then it just gets so absurd and over the top and how dumb and annoying it is sometimes that it's just hilarious. But I feel like that's how I would see somebody with a realistic personality if they were talking to the girl that I like wanted to date. It's a romantic rival who's not an untouchable Prince Charming that just like, oh, I'll never be able to compete with him, but I have that one special thing. He's not an irredeemable dick. He's not actually out to hurt Momo. He's genuinely a good, charismatic guy who has no ill will towards Okarun and just happens to like the same girl as him, and that makes for a pretty interesting dynamic. There's some complex emotions at play there, because there's like a rivalry, but also Okarun doesn't have a lot of friends, and this guy is like extending the olive branch, wanting to be friends with him. It clearly doesn't mean quite as much to him as it does to Okarun, and I just can't wait to see how that dynamic develops, as well as just seeing more screen time with Gigi, because I love him. I really want to see him interact with Ira as well. Both Ira and Gigi have these like just bizarre, delusionally confident personalities that come from ostensibly totally different places, but they are extremely charismatic. When I think of Ira, I was immediately endeared to her because obviously the episode where she was introduced was just cinema. It was so fucking good. But with Ira's character in general, it's sort of a little microcosm for the show's tone, which is a tone that I really like, where there are a lot of serious things constantly happening. Constantly, one thing after another, absurdity, shit's hitting the fan, their lives are constantly in danger. But then also, you just have her, like, even when push comes to shove, at her most dramatic character moments, she's like, well, you know, I still have to kill Momo because she's a demon. And it's like, obviously Momo's not a demon, and she has like this weird savior, narcissistic superiority complex that she needs to fulfill, and it just like, she never breaks it, and eventually she will break it down. That is the arc that her character will inevitably go down, of being able to be more vulnerable and, you know, let the mask slip. But it's very, very funny stuff how just no matter how dire the circumstance, her personality remains unwavering. This is not a bit, this is who she is. And that's sort of the same thing with Gigi. It's like, this is who this guy is. He's just fucking annoying, and I like that, you know, weirdly. Really big fan of that, but I mean, you know, the rest of those episodes weren't as fast. There wasn't as much interesting happening visually. The show finally did slow down a bit, and there's a little bit of controversy centered around the story ending where it ends. It ends in just the middle of a mini arc, just right in the middle of it, super unceremoniously. There's like technically some cliffhangers left, but really it's just, they just cut it off because it was episode 12, and they didn't really put any effort into formatting it around that 12 episode format to be satisfying as a standalone experience. But you know what? This sucks in the present, but I actually prefer it in the long run, even though it doesn't benefit me. I like that the show is just so unwilling to compromise, so unwilling to bend to fitting these arcs and compressing stuff that they otherwise wouldn't compress into being able to fit into this like exact 23 minute episode box. I like that it's taking its time. I like that it's not letting any of those outside factors affect it. It knows it's the shit. It knows it's popular. It knows it's getting a second season within less than a year, which is rare in anime, extremely rare. And so I'm really, really glad they're taking their time with this. That being said, the cliffhanger they ended up on was kind of lame. And then there was a secondary cliffhanger where Momo was like about to be assaulted in a hot spring. And, you know, a lot of people find that to be pretty lowbrow and cringy. Honestly, I'm not really in that. I've never been really sensitive about that kind of thing or those types of issues, but I absolutely see where those people are coming from. And from a narrative perspective, it's just kind of a lazy and uninteresting place to leave the cliffhanger. But I feel like in terms of not being satisfied with the Dandadan ending, we're all kind of being prisoners of the moment right now. And in the long run, I feel like it's all going to make sense. It's going to right the wrong. It's not even really wrong. The episodes are pretty decent, but it's going to right those wrongs and, you know, end up being better in the long run for not sacrificing runtime for the sake of fitting into these exact blocks of episodic time. That was extremely roundabout. That was such a roundabout way of explaining it. But I'm trying to think of what I should go to next, because there truly is a million things to talk about with this show, especially with the visuals, but I guess I'll try not to get into that too much. I mean, the fluidity sometimes is just fucking legendary. The pacing of the show is awesome, by the way. One thing's happening after another. Every scene is usually a combination of a lot of characters. There are the more somber, one-on-one character moments, but there's actually a really strong, almost ensemble feel to this show, and just the sheer volume of moments there are of conversations between 3 or more characters. It's something that I picked up on, and I think it might just be an issue of the shows I've been watching recently are so oriented around just 2 people talking at a time. Like Call of the Night, for example, is the last one. But it's really, really refreshing. And I like that all the characters have aura. They can take over the scene. They exert their presence onto the scene. The character acting through the animation is just chef's kiss. Absolutely beautiful. The show is genre spanning. I mean, there are moments of horror, especially towards the end, and it's looking like they're really going to kick that into the next gear going into season 2. There are amazing shonen elements. I think it technically is a shonen series. I don't really care about labeling it like that though. But it never loses sight of the main character dynamic and that main romance, and making sure to flesh it out as much as possible. It is taking its time. I've said in, I think, multiple other rants that I'm really not a big fan of dramatic irony, where 2 characters don't know the truth, but you know the truth, and they're just sitting there having misunderstandings with each other, and you're just sitting there waiting to have it resolved, because it inevitably will resolve very predictably. I've never been a fan of that. I've always found it counterintuitive and not engaging as a storytelling technique. But I realized through this show that I just have to be emotionally invested in seeing them get to that point of catharsis. I was talking about this in Oshi no Ko when referring to the moment coming down the line, I assume, where the main 2 characters realize that they knew each other in a past life. And that can be interesting. There's a lot of intrigue that can come from that, but there's nothing interesting about holding off on it. I can just be interested in that when it happens. I'm not my mind isn't boiling over theory crafting about how that's going to affect their dynamic and, how sick it's going to be going forward and how many possibilities that opens up for the story. It's I don't really care. And with Momo and Ken, I wasn't really that intellectually interested in seeing it resolved, but it was that all too familiar feeling of yearning. It really effectively encapsulates that sort of feeling when you have a crush on somebody and you just want to tell them how you feel. You just want to spill your guts to them, but you can't, and that sort of anticipation is killing you, even though in some situations it's going to happen eventually. It's it's that feeling of just wanting it to be over, just wanting this painful push and pull to be over with this person that you're romantically interested in, except obviously it's just, a third-person view of a romantic relationship. So it really, really effectively encapsulated the emotions of, being young and having a crush, which makes a lot of sense for their dynamic, and I appreciated that, even if it was set up in a really corny, trite way with the fake falling down on Iris scene. Really solid stuff. Really solid stuff. The main romance is fucking amazing. I made a whole entire main channel video about it. I guess I'll link it in the pinned comment or something, where I talk about the thematic implications of the main relationship and how it relates to the insane world around them and conspiracy theory and, not judging a book by its cover and vulnerability and all that good stuff. They are really good for each other. They need each other to grow in this coming-of-age story and to, check each other as they wander through this absolutely nonsensical world with ideology being pushed onto them left and right. They are there to protect each other, and sometimes that means calling each other out on their bullshit, which is really wholesome. It's really nice to watch, and it's surprisingly realistic in how, I guess, much of a positive influence it is on both of their lives. They definitely bring the best out of each other. And I definitely appreciate that, especially when so much effort is put into endearing you to their personalities with these visually ambitious scenes of low-key characterization. That's what I mean when I say this show has like that modern classic aura to it, because every single scene, you know, some scenes in the last 3 episodes notwithstanding, is trying to do something unique. Every single scene is trying to have style. Nothing is filler. Nothing is like waiting for the climax so that they can go all out and make a memorable moment. It's just there's effort put into everything. It reminds me a lot of Fooly Cooly, because obviously it's an alien coming of age story with like a bunch of different ideologies being pushed onto these kids and a lot of like sexual symbolism and thematic overtones, but also in the sense that Fooly Cooly was like a freaking playground for a bunch of the world's best animators, all to use various disparate techniques and sort of fuse them together into this beautiful, crazy brainchild that became an all-time classic, and it's probably one of my favorite anime to this day. Dandadan really reminds me of Fooly Cooly. It was when I saw that noodle scene, and I remembered the noodle scene from Fooly Cooly. I'm not going to say that the Dandadan noodle scene was as sick as the noodle dialogue from Fooly Cooly with the comic book panels and all that, but I was like, yes, this show is not trying to be Fooly Cooly, but this show is trying to do what Fooly Cooly tried to do so long ago and just inject that personality into every single scene, which is very impressive because while it's not quite as densely chaotic as Fooly Cooly, it's pretty close. And people forget, man, Fooly Cooly was 6 episodes. This thing's going to be at least like 25. I think it's going to go on for much longer. So I'm very impressed to see it sustain that over 9 episodes and kind of sustain it over the last 3. This show is just so good, man. There's so much to say about so many of these characters. Of course, the acrobatic, silky backstory, the boxer, Japanese salaryman, alien mantis shrimp guy, the fusions, the what are they called, like sapios or serpios or something, the weird little like alien guys that are like just going around trying to essay everybody. It's just ape shit, man. And there's so much thematically happening there. Everything I just mentioned isn't just, you know, inane bullshit. Everything I mentioned has like a real world counterpart that it is representing in this coming of age story about dealing with the horrors, trials, tribulations, and vexations, that was a really pretentious way of saying it, of the adult world. Very similar to Fooly Cooly in that theming. And that's sort of where I draw the comparison, because it also strikes me as a similarly passionate project. I wonder how much direct inspiration was taken from Fooly Cooly. I'm not sure if it's ever explicitly referenced it, because it references so many shows and anime and stuff, but yeah, pretty cool. There also seems to be a lot of influence from like Yakuza movies and stuff like that, but that's not really my wheelhouse. I can't really speak on that too much. I really like the whole Yakuza theme to Momo and Seiko, though. I feel like it's a really interesting angle on a character that I haven't seen because I don't watch a lot of anime that include Yakuza for whatever reason. I mean, they're a pretty popular staple within the genre. It's a pretty prominent, you know, cultural thing in Japan, but I don't know, but I haven't seen that character a lot, and I like that Momo is like not only this like countercultural brash gyaru, but she's also like got all these like Yakuza aesthetics to her home life with fucking Seiko over there just being a badass all the time and sort of having that vigilante justice but ultimately carefree mentality. It's really interesting to see that clash with Okarun and his, at the end of the day, highly people-pleasing tendencies that, you know, he somewhat resents. Like, he constantly wants to be better for other people, and he does not like that about himself because he realizes that is the root of a lot of his pain and stress, and that's why when he evolves into his form where he channels Turbo Granny's power, he becomes like this aloof, nonchalant drehe. It's because that's who he wants to be on some level, and, you know, a little bit of an immature, potentially short-sighted sense, but also, you know, it could hold some merit. Like, he wants to be disaffected. He wants to be able to just have his original opinions and be able to express them and stand by them confidently. But at the end of the day, he kind of wilts under pressure a lot of times, especially more so towards the beginning of the series. And that's what Momo brings out of him. And the cool thing about this dynamic is it's always the pissed off girl, and then the soy boy. And the pissed off girl's trying to get the soy boy to come out of his shell, but he won't do it, and that just makes her more pissed off, and that just makes him go further back into his shell. And then you know what, he just erupts, especially as they get more comfortable, and then he starts going off on her, and now it's looped all the way back around full circle to being a learning moment, being a moment that builds his confidence and experience and standing up to people and expressing his thoughts. It's a long time favorite dynamic of mine. It's very nice having the one person who's just so assertive and confident, trying to bring that out of somebody who's a lot more shy and keeps saying sorry about everything. I really like that. The whole thing with Turbo Granny and the transformation, obviously there's once again a lot of symbolism there involving puberty. I can't quite wrap my head around the idea of Okaroon running but not being able to move. Maybe that is more of a random gimmick. I know that it's directly tied to the Turbo Granny story of her just running through the tunnel and being extremely she's very one note and single-minded when it comes to her pride and just the way she views superiority and stuff like that when talking about other spirits and shit. She's I win, I beat everybody in a foot race, that is my thing. That is one thing nobody will ever beat me on, and she's just obsessed with that. Okaroon has a bit of an obsessive personality, so it could somewhat reflect that, but I just think it's interesting that he can get running super, super fast and build up so much momentum, but there has to be a somewhat precise location, light at the end of the tunnel, because he can't really deviate, and once he has his mind set on something, he can't, once it's in motion, he can't really stop the train. I don't really get that. Maybe somebody can help give me their opinions or theories in the comments, because it's really interesting. The show's just so fucking daunting with all of the characterization and metaphor happening. It's sick. I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I don't want to get into any of the negatives. I have a couple negatives, but honestly, I just want to talk good about a show that I thought was good. And hey, if that's a crime, sue me. If that's a crime, sue me. All right? You guys should check out my main channel video on the topic. It's a lot better than this freaking, disjointed diatribe. But, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot I want to say. Maybe I'll make a separate video about one of the characters. I kind of want to get into Ira in particular and sort of the symbolism, the surprisingly rich symbolism behind how her character is introduced, how it's mirrored and developed by Acro Silky, and then also how it is introduced sort of chronologically in the story, not only with her first encounter with Okaroon, but when his freaking ball falls on her head and she sees that as a sign from the gods that she's chosen. Obviously, it's a confirmation bias thing. She's just confirming the opinion she was already always going to have. But it's just the fact that it's a ball and it's sort of a representation of sexual gratification that gives her this sort of god complex. It's very, very, very interesting to me. It's fucking sick.